questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McLaren, thank you for being here. As I was listening to your testimony and the questioning here, I heard a frequent assessment by you that you feel that the agency is operating fairly and transparently. Is that a fair assessment of your feeling?
Yes, that is a fair assessment, and I might add that the process, the 404C process, is not complete. There still is more due process that would be yet to come in that.
So, summarize what you're saying. The EPA is a transparent organization, is operating within the scope of the law that was set up by Congress and in the public interest.
I believe that to be so.
I wish that was the case, but from my experience in the short time I have been in Congress, we have had less than transparency out of the agency. As chairman of the Oversight Subcommittee, we have had countless requests and even subpoenas for information from the EPA, and yet we continue to not receive the information that we, as a constitutional body who is given the oversight authority over the EPA, including recently receiving several thousand pages of garbled junk when we requested information. So that leaves a lot of questions not only with this body but also with the American people as far as the transparency. But I'd like to move on. If we could bring up the slide here. We know that Mr. North had frequent email conversations with Jeff Parker, who was representing Alaska tribes, as well as other agencies or organizations that were opposed to the Pebble Mine, and we looked at the possibility of collusion. But what I want to look at is the means and the methods of which that communication has taken place. Private emails, as you are probably aware, seem to be a big issue with this administration. And in this part of the deposition, it was asked, okay, one of the issues that I think comes up in the PLP litigation is the utilization of personal email addresses to sometimes communicate while you were working from home. Did you do that on occasion when you worked from home? And Mr. North said yes. The question was then, and why did you do that? Mr. North answered, I'm going to give two reasons. One is because the EPA system didn't work very well, and so in order to communicate with people by email, I had to use my home email. The other reason is because there was no reason not to. I mean, nobody ever said don't use your home email, and sometimes I was sending things off to other EPA employees' home emails if they were working at home, just because it was convenient and there was no reason not to do that. Is this appropriate conduct for EPA employees?
So I believe at that point in time, the EPA policy was that if people used personal email, they were to forward those emails to the EPA server. I don't believe it is appropriate to use personal email, and I think we've trained our employees that that's not, certainly in subsequent years, that's not the way to communicate.
Are you aware that he had used his personal email? Did you know at that time he was using personal email?
I did not. I've subsequently become aware of that as the IG became involved.
Is this a violation of the Federal Records Act to use a personal email address to communicate on official business and not courtesy copy the EPA server?
So I'm not that familiar with the Federal Records Act to actually make that conclusion. I've, of course, taken the training, and the training that we get is to use our EPA email addresses, and if out of necessity, if the system's down and you're forced to use your personal email, forward it to the EPA server. So
you're not familiar with the Federal Records Act. Is it not there to ensure that public records are there for transparency and fairness, as you stated that your agency operates, but you're not aware of what the policies are?
So again, I'm aware of what the policies are.
Do you use your personal email address?
No.
You do not? You have not used your personal email account for business? So
the only times I've used my personal email address would be if I had a large document to review and I might forward that from my EPA address, but that's the only time I would ever.
So the Federal Records Act, part of the reason that we have that is to make sure that there is transparency. And when it is not used, it really causes some problems. In fact, your own Inspector General was not able to obtain those personal emails that were sent by Mr. North. that brings us to question, is sometimes this used just to avoid the Freedom of Information Act?
So again, our policies are clear. Our policies are that people need to use their EPA email, and if they had occasion to use personal email, to forward those emails and documents to the EPA servers so that records would be.
Are there other employees in the EPA that are currently using their personal email accounts?
They should not be.
If they are they dealt with administratively, disciplinary?
I have not had the occasion to experience that because our policies and our training are very clear on that.
Okay. I see my time has expired, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Loudermilk.